Welcome, guys. Today we're going to do the good, the bad, and the in-between on Amy Klobuchar. We're going to do a deep dive because Minnesota, this is for voting age Minnesotans, and it's for people who want the facts, not team sports. Sounds like Governor Tim Walz is reportedly ending his bid for a third term, and that immediately turns the 2026 governor's race in Minnesota into a high-stakes, wide-open fight. And one of the biggest, if she jumps in, the whole field changes, names is Senator Amy Klobuchar. Let's get into it. So let me be extremely clear about the purpose of this deep dive. This is not a campaign ad and it's not a hit piece. It's a reality check. The goal is to give you the good, the bad, and the messy in between so you can do your own deep dive too and not vote based on vibes, rumors, or Facebook memes. Also, Minnesota voting basics. Yes, you vote at 18 on election day, and Minnesota also allows eligible 16, 17-year-olds to pre-register so they're ready when they turn 18. Now, Minnesota Secretary of State Amy Klobuchar. Let's talk about her. Because Amy Klobuchar, let's say, is Minnesota through and through. She's built a brand around competence, practicality, get stuff done in winning statewide by big margins. She's also got real controversies that don't go away just because people like her. And some of those controversies involve how she used power either as a prosecutor or as a boss. So she runs for governor. Minnesotans deserve the full picture of Amy Klobuchar. Who she is and where she comes from. I'm so sorry I have my dog with me today. Klobuchar has had a long political career with a very institutional path. Law degree, legal work, and then elected prosecutor, then U.S. Senator. One of the most cited early moments that shaped her public identity came from motherhood and actually healthcare access. She has talked publicly about a birth and hospital discharge experience that pushed her actually into advocacy around postpartum care standards. And this is part of her long-running family policy and consumer protection narrative, actually. Then her first major elected role happened, Hennepin County Attorney, Minnesota's largest county. That job matters because it tells you, well, how someone treats power when they're the person deciding who gets charged, how the state fights, and what public safety basically means in practice. Let's get into that. So let me be extremely clear about the purpose of this deep dive. This is not a campaign ad and it's not a hit piece. It's a reality check. The goal is to give you the good, the bad, and the messy in between so you can do your own deep dive too and not vote based on vibes, rumors, or Facebook memes. Also, Minnesota voting basics. Yes, you vote at 18 on election day, and Minnesota also allows eligible 16, 17-year-olds to pre-register so they're ready when they turn 18. Now, Minnesota Secretary of State Amy Klobuchar. Let's talk about her. Because Amy Klobuchar, let's say, is Minnesota through and through. She's built a brand around competence, practicality, get stuff done in winning statewide by big margins. She's also got real controversies that don't go away just because people like her. And some of those controversies involve how she used power either as a prosecutor or as a boss. So she runs for governor. Minnesotans deserve the full picture of Amy Klobuchar. Who she is and where she comes from. I'm so sorry I have my dog with me today. Klobuchar has had a long political career with a very institutional path. Law degree, legal work, and then elected prosecutor, then U.S. Senator. One of the most cited early moments that shaped her public identity came from motherhood and actually healthcare access. She has talked publicly about a birth and hospital discharge experience that pushed her actually into advocacy around postpartum care standards. And this is part of her long-running family policy and consumer protection narrative, actually. Then her first major elected role happened, Hennepin County Attorney, Minnesota's largest county. That job matters because it tells you, well, how someone treats power when they're the person deciding who gets charged, how the state fights, and what public safety basically means in practice. Let's get into that. So her prosecutor era, tough on crime, results in the lasting baggage from that. So as a Hennepin County Attorney, Klobuchar developed a reputation as tough, aggressive, and conviction-focused. And that played well with voters at the time, but prosecutor records don't age quietly because tough on crime politics and the choices made back then can, well, produce consequences that are showing up for her decades later. Two areas from that era still follow her to this day. The first is Mayan Burrell case. Burrell was convicted as a teenager in the killing of an 11-year-old, and years later there was major public controversy about whether the case was actually wrong. Minnesota media has documented the political and public pressure around this case, the questions it raised, and the eventual outcome where a sentence was commuted allowing his release. If Klobuchar runs statewide again, this will come back up because people are going to ask, what was the quality of justice in that era, and how did her office handle cases involving young defendants, community pressure, and evidence? And I'd also like to take the time to say that, yes, mistakes are in the past, skeletons are in the past for every single political candidate, especially ones running for Minnesota, I'll be talking about in the next few weeks, right? But keep in mind that people can learn, open their mindset, and change, but the change only happens when we stop accepting apologies and only accepting changed actions from these type of people. Now, we're going to get into the second one here now. Okay, the second one is police accountability. Reporting has documented that during her tenure, the county attorney's office did not bring criminal charges against police officers in shootings. And that process often relied on grand jury, by the way, which historically almost never indicts officers, and which also reduces transparency to a point in a way that frustrates the public, honestly. And this became a major point of criticism during the national reckoning over policing, because people looked backwards and asked, what did leaders do when they had the power to set a different standard? So her prosecutor era can be summarized like this. She built credibility as a hardline public safety figure, but the record contains landmines, especially for communities who experience the tough side of tough on crime, and for voters who care about wrongful convictions and a police accountability. In her Senate era, we're going to talk about why she's popular there. So let's talk about why she's been so successful with her Senate era. Klobuchar has been a durable statewide winner, right? She's also one of those senators who built a brand around being productive, bipartisan, and boring in the way that many voters actually want government to be boring. She has a long track record of coalition building, committee work, and pushing legislation that's broadly framed as practical: consumer protection, healthcare costs, agricultural and rural priorities, infrastructure, election-related governance, and competition/antitrust themes. That effective lawmaker reputation is real in the sense that multiple measures and coverage across years have treated her as someone who works the system well and knows how to move bills through it. And that's a major reason people assume she could be a strong governor candidate, because Minnesota voters often reward competence. She also became nationally visible during her 2020 presidential run, which matters because if she runs for governor, it's not a normal Minnesota race anymore, you guys. The entire country is going to watch us. Money's going to pour in, outside narratives get slapped onto Minnesota like a sticker, whether we want them or not. And next, we're going to get to the biggest skeleton question of Amy Klobuchar. Now, for the biggest skeleton question, the staff treatment allegations that have been brought up. What's actually credible? So we're going to get to the part that a lot of people ask me to be very extra careful with the facts, and I'm going to. Because there have been serious, widely reported allegations over the years about Klobuchar's treatment of staff, especially during the period when she was preparing for and running in the 2020 presidential primary. Multiple major outlets reported accounts from former staff describing her as a harsh boss, including claims about yelling, harsh messages, and humiliating management style. Now, here's what we can responsibly say in a fact-grounded way. What's documented is that multiple former staffers across multiple credible news organizations described her as demanding and sometimes demeaning. Some stories included vivid, anecdotes, like reports of thrown objects or unusual outbursts that were repeated in the media because they were dramatic and memorable. But what is also documented is that Klobuchar did not flatly deny being tough. Publicly, she has acknowledged that she can be demanding and that she has pushed people hard. That matters because it means this isn't purely someone made it up with no bias. She has essentially conceded the core theme: high pressure, high standards, sometimes sharp management, while rejecting the worst characterizations of her intent. What is also part of the record, though, is that many former staffers defended her publicly, saying she was a strong mentor, that they learned a lot from her, and that the public narrative flattened a complex workplace into only the worst moments. So, the credibility question looks a little like this now. These allegations are not random internet rumors. They were reported by major outlets, and they were persistent enough that they became a defined storyline of her presidential run. At the same time, the public record also includes a meaningful number of defenders and the reality that workplace dynamics can be complicated, especially when power, ambition, stress, and constant public scrutiny collide. The most responsible framing of that skeleton is there is credible reporting that she has a harsh management reputation and that former staff described negative experiences. She has acknowledged being a tough boss, and there is also credible evidence that not all staff experienced her that way, because many came forward in her defense. If she runs for governor, voters will have to decide what that means to them. Does it signal a leader who cracks under stress and lashes out, or is it a leader who is intense and imperfect, but she's effective? And that's a values question. But the underlying reporting is real enough that it will not disappear in her governor campaign. Now, it does not matter what I think, because even though I know her personally, I'm doing these videos to be as non-biased as possible, because that's what Minnesotans deserve. Now, we're going to get into why she could dominate the DFL. Why Amy Klobuchar could dominate the DFL field or trigger a major internal fight. So if Klobuchar runs, right, she's instantly the biggest name in the DFL bench. But that doesn't mean she's automatically uniting everyone. A governor primary can become, well, how do I put this in breakdown words? Basically, she's going to try to run on what Democratic Minnesota wants right now. The pragmatic institution builder or the reform and rupture candidate. Her prosecutor baggage could be used against her by progressives. Her tough boss reputation could also be used against her by anyone arguing that Minnesota needs a governor who leads without fear-based management. On the other hand, her biggest asset is electability, a proven statewide coalition, suburban strength, and ability to win broad. In a chaotic national climate like we have right now, a lot of voters default to, I want the person who can actually govern. Now, how might she compare to the Republican candidates? And yes, I have scripts going for those guys too. So if she runs, Republicans will try to frame her as a national Democrat, tied to Washington and out of touch with real Minnesota. They'll likely resurrect the prosecutor era issues in ads. They'll also weaponize the staff treatment reporting because it's personal and sticky. But don't worry, I've got their skeletons in their closets too, and we're going to talk about them in the following couple of weeks. But the flip side is, she's a difficult opponent because she's not new, she's not unknown, and she's not easy to spin narratives on. She's been vetted nationally already. So the race becomes less about who is she and more about what does Minnesota want next, and what does her record say she would actually do with power at the state level. And the honest conclusion of all that is what Minnesotans should do with this information. If Amy Klobuchar runs for governor, the correct move as a voter is not to worship her and not to smear her. The correct move is to interrogate her record like she's applying for the highest management job in Minnesota, because she is. Look at what she did with power as a prosecutor. Look at what she did with power as a senator. Look at what credible reporting says about how she treated the people closest to her. Then compare her against every other candidate who announces using those same standards. That's called systems ethics. Because the only way Minnesota stays functional in an era of national chaos like right now is if we refuse to vote blindly, no matter whose sign is in your yard. This is your state. Do the deep dive, then vote like you mean it. That's all I have for you guys. And next we're going to get into the My Pillow guy.